Good evening. Welcome to this Audit Committee of March 27, 2024. Are there any apologies for absence, please? Thank you, Councillor Doe. Thank you very much. Can I sign the record of the meeting held on the 10th of January as correct, please? Agreed. Thank you. There are no urgent matters this evening. Are there any declarations of interest, either pecuniary or other significant interests? No interest to declare. Thank you. If I may, I'll ask Andy McNally Johnson to introduce the report on the Treasury Management Report for Quarter 3, please.
Thank you, Chair. Jonathan is a hard act to follow, so I shall do my best for you all. So the report that's presented tonight is the Treasury Management Report covering the period up to 31st of December 2023. During that period, borrowing increased by £11.7 million over the 9 months since the start of the financial year, but remains £64.7 million below our CFR. The table at paragraph 6.1 on page 17 refers to that. The debt maturity profile is shown at 6.1, the top of page 18, and shows to be skewed towards the short to medium term. Our Treasury advisors are still advising against long-term borrowing as interest rates are expected to fall. So as that happens, we'll obviously react to that. The table at 4.2 at the top of page 16 officers are taking into account the maturity profile when taking out new or replacement borrowing to keep within the limit of £150 million maturing within 12 months as set out as part of the Treasury strategy. Another aim is to have regular maturities, typically £5 million in most months, so that debt could be reduced quickly if there was significant inflow of capital receipts or the future capital programme was curtailed. It allows us to react as and when we need to. On the subject of LOBOs, lender options, borrower options, £10 million was repaid in December 2023. Another £5 million was repaid after the review period in January 2024. Further redemptions are thought to be a possibility in the near future as coupon rates are below current market rates. However, as rates fall, that risk will reduce. No debt rescheduling has taken place during the period under review or is expected for the remainder of the year, not in the next few days, except as reported in respect of the LOBO repayments. The capital value of property fund investments is now below the original cost. The table at 6.5, the top of page 19, shows the fall in value during the 9 months to the 31st of December. Except for the CCLA, the total return, that's capital movements and capital and dividend received on the funds, has been negative. As previously reported, one fund, Lothbury, has been in particular difficulty, and it will either be dissolved or merged with that from another provider by the end of this month. There is a meeting tomorrow which will decide whether it will be dissolved immediately or there are further talks as an extension to that, and there's further talks. The latest indication is that we think, based on the last time they voted and it didn't get enough votes to extend, is that dissolution seems most likely outcome. This will result in a capital loss around £1 million. It could be one way or the other. We have forecast that in our round 3 interest and financing outturn projection. which obviously has been through Cabinet, and obviously we will wait and see what happens with that one. Investment performance remains in line with our peers. See the graph at paragraph 8.2 at the top of page 20. And I suppose a couple of other small things. The compliance with Treasury limits as per paragraph 8.3. There were no breaches of the limits as set out. The limits have been set out in Treasury strategy during the period. And last thing to mention is Appendix 1 has an economic update provided by our Treasury Advisors link. I am happy to take any questions members may have.
Thank you. Any members, please? Councillor Hackwell, thank you.
Thank you, Andy, for your report. A couple of little things. Obviously, we always talk about the debt maturity profile at these meetings, and we've got nearly 40 million due to be refinanced this year. Yet, from the forecast of the interest rates, we're not really going to see a good demand dropping interest rate for probably till the middle of next year. So, because I think if the table says that, you know, we're still at 5.25 and it's going to go down by 1, but not get back to 3 for probably till September next year. So will the strategy be to refinance them on a very short period of time? Bearing in mind you've got another 100 million to refinance next year, and that 100 million next year, is that due at the beginning of the year or the end of the year? So that's one question. And if I may, just a bit of information for myself. We have a excuse me, 52 million capital repayment of capital receipts that's in for 23-24. What actually is that? Because we don't have one for 22-23 and we don't have one for 23-24. So it seems a bit of an outlier that it's coming in. That's on page 16, 5.2.
I'll take the first question on the maturity profile. Yes, we will continue to work with Link and we'll take their advice. Obviously, Phil, our Section 151 officer, would expect that, but obviously we'll liaise with him as well. The large maturity that we're going to have during the next financial year is mainly at the end of the year. So obviously we'll review that as time goes on, and look, we will be in contact with Link and look at the best way, whether it's a pure refinancing over a longer or shorter term. We'll judge that at that point in time. I have to say, I'll have to get back to you on that figure and that table. I apologise. I am obviously aware that we have taken out borrowing as part of the capital expenditure, and some of that is based on future capital receipts. I would need to look at the specific figure. What I will say is we track that borrowing, and as capital receipts come in, we will use that to reduce our borrowing as such with that. But obviously, it's dependent on us receiving the capital receipts. So I'd need to check what's happened there.
Councillor Nestorov, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I actually have a few questions. First one is about debt restructuring. Is there any clear triggers in the Treasury strategy of when the interest rates go? Do we have a trigger that we know we can rejuvenate the loans? Let's say it like that. At 10.2, should I ask all the questions or at once?
I'm happy to take one at a time if
Okay,
that
okay, let's do that.
suits. Okay. Obviously, our advisors look carefully at how they feel interest rates are going to go, and we will base our Treasury strategy based on their advice. So obviously the Treasury strategy for each year is considered in January and February, but obviously it's a moving feast. So we have a strategy, but that's the whole point of these quarterly reports, that we can provide updates as time goes along. If there is a change to the expectation, which may change how we decide on our borrowing or indeed our investments, then obviously we'll look to react that way. But obviously when a strategy comes out, there is a lot of estimation in there because obviously the timing that it is. But we take the advice and we try and work closely with those advisors which are our experts, who have a lot of fingers in pies and know exactly what is going on, and they're fairly accurate, you know, in general. Obviously, things that happened with interest rates where they rose, I think a lot of experts wouldn't have expected that to happen. So it caught a lot of people off guard throughout, whether it's local authorities or in the private sector. That would have been the case.
Which brings me to my second question, which is about the Waterbury Fund, of course. So how do we actually decide to invest in any fund, not just Waterbury? What research is done before that? Are we taking an advice from someone, or how does it work? And considering that the Waterbury Fund recent problems, is there a change in the investment strategy that will prevent in the future having similar results?
Okay, it's worth saying, at the time we invested in property funds, they were considered to give us good returns, and indeed they did, pre-pandemic, give us good returns compared to other investments. And I think the pandemic has changed everything. It's changed the way we work, and it's changed maybe the properties that those funds were invested in maybe are not as valuable as they once would have been, and they would have made returns. So what we intend to do, along with, I expect a lot of people that are invested in property funds, is to have chats or have talks with those property funds and find out what they're planning to do to try and improve their returns and the value of their investments that they've got, so that they can pass on to us with dividends. We will then take a view on that, and if it's felt that things should change and be different from how they are at the moment, then we will work with members to make that, to take that view. But I think it's something that in the coming year, I think certainly the Section 151 officer is intent on working with members and those property funds to look more deeply into them, make sure, because we did invest in them for the long term. These weren't a short-term thing. So we've got to make sure that we're making the right decisions. But if the decision is that, having looked into them, that things should change, and that's the feeling that is the best way to go, then that's something that will be brought back to members for decisions to be made at that time. So I think it's something, what I'd say, in the next year, we will be looking more closely at all our investments and making sure that the path we're currently on is the correct path. If it isn't, we'll look to change that.
Yeah, I think just more diverse portfolio, it's always more resilient. I mean, like it's just... okay, and I have a few more, if you don't mind, a couple more questions. 8.2 shows that Medway Council is getting lower returns compared to other local authorities. Is there a way to look maybe at the local authorities that are getting the highest returns and kind of copy their strategy, or at least try to replicate it here?
I certainly will look at that, and I was indeed at an investment benchmarking group literally 2 days ago, and there are authorities there that are getting better returns, some that are not, are getting worse returns. Some of it is about your risk. So if you want to take more risk, then the returns will be higher, but so will the risk. At this point, we've chosen as an authority to try and make sure we're fairly prudent with our risk-taking. But again, it's something that the whole investment strategy we'll look at as an authority, and obviously we'll work officers with members to see if there are other ways that are least risky that we can get the best returns for the investments we have, and that's something we certainly will be looking at in the coming year. And I know Phil will be very keen on our finance and investment budget being in the best place that it can be.
I'm sure you're doing your best. It's not easy. It's never easy when you invest. Last question, I promise. 10.2, it shows that we have, of the finance budget, it shows we have an underspent of almost 3 million. How are we going to relocate those? Are we going to reinvest them, or are they going to cover some losses?
What I would say is, obviously, as any budget the council has, it's not ring-fenced to investments. So we invest on a cash flow basis. If we have the cash available, we feel that we don't need it for our own purposes to fund our own spend, then we will invest if the opportunity is there. Like any budget, whether it's over or underspent, it will go into the overall underspend or overspend of the authority. In our case this year, pretty much determined it's an overspend. So that in itself will reduce the overall overspend, but of course, and that will then reduce the call on reserves. But the decision to invest will be based on our own cash basis and whether we have the cash there at that point that we can invest. Because if you're investing, even if you invest, say you had some money and you felt you could lend it out to other local authority, you can get some very short-term investments, and some authorities are doing that and charging very high interest rates, I would say, at this point. But a lot of the time you're expected to have that cash out there for anywhere between a year and 2 years, and you've got to be sure that you don't need that money. At this point in time, the council isn't in that position, but if it happens, we'll obviously look at that the best we can.
Thank you so much for your answers.
Lending to other authorities, excuse me, Chair. I think if you're lending to other authorities, presumably some of that is pretty high risk, isn't it now?
I think this is the difficulty. I think the headlines in the media seem to suggest that some authorities could be a bad risk. What we have to remember is every local authority is government-backed. Yeah. So there is no authority out there that would be a high risk. However, in talking to other local authorities, their leadership do feel that some authorities are a higher risk and therefore will be less likely to want to lend to them. And the local authority market for lending has, let's just say, contracted quite a lot. Yeah, so there aren't that many out there who are willing to lend, and even if they are willing to lend, they want very high interest rates at the moment. I've seen some out today between 7.5%, which is about 2% above PWLB at this point in time. So you do pay a premium. However, the thing about PWLB is you need 5 working days to actually have the money in. So we have to be very clear on the cash we need, and it has been difficult at times because you don't always know until a couple of days before the actual money goes out of the payment runs. We're not notified of them, so if there are some large payments, it could potentially cause us trouble. And I know, as in my predecessor, Jonathan, we like to have, if we can, about £10 million of liquid cash available just in case there are some large bills. And as we know, we have a large capital programme and there could be large bills going out at specific times. So, yeah, we have to keep a close eye on our cash flow and react as and when we can to that.
Well, if you have a balance of that nature, which I can quite see why you want it, presumably it's quite possible these days to actually get quite a deal of interest on short-term cash.
Absolutely. If we felt we were in that position to offer that, we have our cash flow goes on a daily basis. We do look at that, and I would say to you, if you're looking at your average month, it's very up and down depending on where you are in the month. So I very rarely find that we have that sort of cash balance that stays there the whole month, enough for us to be able to go out for. Potentially, I suppose I could look at a few days if somebody wants a very short-term loan, that there could be something for us, but and it's something we will keep an eye on.
Councillor Hackwell.
Just going back to that same table in 10.2, I'm a bit confused in the fact that you've got an underspend of 1.3 million, yet you took 900 and something thousand out of reserves. So, which doesn't. Why did you need to take the 900 out of reserves if you've got an underspend? I don't understand.
So I think that's looking, the contribution from reserves is looking at the bigger picture here, but I think if you look at that particular line that we're looking at, which the overspend there includes our projected loss from that property fund that we spoke about earlier, and that in itself means that we would be, I think in that, sorry, I'll start again. In our projected underspend, that also includes taking a chunk of money out of reserves in order to have that forecast that is in there. And that would have been, I guess, the budget that was originally set would have been predicated on that as it was. So it's not that it wasn't expected, but obviously if that underspend would have been larger. But obviously when we set the budget, it's based on that. Obviously when we get to the outturn, if it's felt we don't need to call on reserves, then we'll try and reduce that where we can anyway.
I think we have to remember that we're looking at Q3 here, and that was in preparation for the budget. So you have to remember what you're looking at. You're looking at historic figures. No, you're looking at round 3. Sorry. Yeah, but that's a forecast, but the figures themselves are historic. Sorry, I didn't make the point clear. Anybody else? Any more questions? Councillor Hackwell, you have any more? Thank you. May I call on the Vice Chair, please?
I move recommendation at page 15 that the committee note the Treasury management report.
Sorry, can we note that we will have a briefing note on the question that was asked of Andy and the commitment that he's given to get back to us? Sorry. Yes. I think Steve will definitely put that in the report. And I thank you very much for your questions. Andy, if you need to go, please, because I think James is on next. Sorry. Yes. Is that seconded? Is it agreed? Thank you. I move now to item 6, which is the recruitment of an independent member. And I'll ask Wayne Hemingway to introduce this report, please, on pages 31 to 40. Thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. So this report is seeking approval of the proposed job description for an independent member and the associated recruitment process. Members will recall that the Audit Committee considered a report on 30th of November last year on whether the committee should include in its membership an independent member, and the committee agreed to recommend to full council that an independent member be appointed to the committee on a fully non-voting basis. Full council on 24th of January earlier this year approved the provision of an independent member, and at the same meeting the council approved through the independent remuneration panel report to set an annual allowance for the independent member at a rate of 10% of the basic allowance. This is £1,148 under the current members' allowances. This report includes a proposed job description at Appendix 1, and members' views are sought on this as per recommendation 1.1 in the report. In addition, the report makes a recommendation regarding the composition of the interview panel as set out in section 5 of the report and recommendation 1.2. Finally, the decision to approve the proposed candidate is a matter for the Audit Committee as per recommendation 1.3. So following the interview process being undertaken and a recommendation being made back to this committee. Happy to take any questions. Thank you.
Thank you, Wayne. Any member? Councillor Doe, thank you.
May I ask, I was rather perturbed actually when I saw the amount that we're prepared to pay for this, which is just over £1,000 a year. It doesn't seem to me that, you know, if you're wanting somebody who comes from the outside with a good knowledge of the financial world, as it were, unless it's simply, you know, that would be the value really, to have that kind of alternative view, if you like, that's not within the walls of the council. I think this could be very valuable. But whether you're going to get it for £1,000 a year, I'm very doubtful. But perhaps I may be wrong. I mean, it just seems to me that what the sort of things I see, you know, in the local, well, not local, but in periodicals I read, that seems to be rather.
Thank you, Councillor Doe. Thank you, Chairperson. So the independent remuneration panel itself would have done research into how much sort of similar independent members would have been paid at other local authorities. So this would not be out of kilter with that. And certainly, I think at the November meeting, this committee had a very kind of good and frank discussion around whether to even have an independent member, but of course around what that payment might be. And I think it certainly felt to me that there was a feeling that person shouldn't be paid and what might be seen as an excessive allowance. But the IRP recommendations were agreed at full council earlier this year.
Any other questions? Thank you, Councillor Hackwell.
Is it the remit of this committee tonight to decide whether it's members on the interview panel supported by officers or members and officers? Have we got to make that decision tonight? That's one question. And the other thing is, on the job description, it says that an independent member must not be or have been during the last 5 years a councillor or officer or a spouse or a councillor or officer of Medway Council. It actually doesn't exclude members, as far as I can see. There's no and the independent member must not be a relative or close friend of a council or a council officer of the council. Can we just change the to Medway Council? Because if you're a member of Gravesham or something like that, then it'd be clearer if it said Medway.
Yeah, if I take that final point. So, yeah, in terms of the job description itself, the following persons cannot be an independent member. Obviously, tonight it's for your comments, so we'll take that on board. So obviously, we will stress it cannot be a Medway a serving Medway councillor, and of course, any other changes in terms of obviously the independent member must not be a relative or a close friend of a councillor or officer of. Yeah, of course, we will change that to Medway Council for the avoidance of doubt. And in terms of your
Question is, have we got to make the decision whether the interview panel is members supported by,
yeah.
and that's the decision we've got to make tonight, is it?
It is. So thank you, Councillor Hackwell. So if I point you back to recommendation 1.2, we are, as officers, recommending to you that the panel should be as set out at kind of 5.1.2, which is members and officers. But of course, it is up to you as a committee to decide how you want to do that. So we're giving you a kind of a recommended approach in terms of the membership be obviously the chairperson, vice chairperson, opposition spokesperson, plus the Assistant Director, Legal and Governance, and the Chief Operating Officer. But it's a matter for this committee to determine that. So if you wished it to be members only, supported by officers, that's up to yourselves as a committee.
And the difference is that at the interview panel, officers get a vote if it's members and officers, but they don't get a vote if it's members supported by officers. Is that how it works?
That would be correct. But of course, I mean, I guess you're always looking for a consensus approach here anyway. But thank you, yes.
Do members have a feeling as to how they would like this to run?
It does seem to me that if you've got, certainly dealing with how we dealt with these things at senior level in the past, I think that it does seem to me reasonable. The officers are there to give advice, or in other words, they will be running potential that people are already probably doing. They're through the ringer and will be able to give us advice with regard to the choice. I think when it gets a bit confusing is when they're actually involved in the decision. It seems to me that's not perhaps a very good way, precedent-wise, to proceed. But I'm only, as I say, I'm only a visitor.
Would members be happy if officers asked for clarification on other authorities? I'm thinking particularly about Medway Fire and places like that where we have independent members again, and we also have a mixture of officers and elected members on the boards. So I'm trying to get a consensus because Councillor Goulburn very kindly agreed that we needed to work collegiately on this, and I'm happy to go with some. I've got a view, and we can discuss it. But I do think that we need the expertise that is within our officer corps, particularly Chief Legal Officer and the Chief Finance Officers, to help us along the route. And actually how the scoring or how the appointment goes, it'll be technically done and it'll be above board. So I'm happy to go with whatever the committee decides.
The experience I've had in this council is when we've been to the Appointments Committee, and the Appointments Committee is members supported by officers. So the officers are in the room, they close there for discussions, but the actual decisions are made by members only. And I think that seems to work. Yeah. It doesn't mean that the officers get a vote, but they're there to help and advise, but members make the decision. Yeah.
I think everybody has a. I think that works pretty well in all other appointments. I haven't got an objection to that, and could we take that as a proposal? Are we able to do that?
I think so, Chairperson. I think you could agree this evening that the membership of the interview panel, comprised of yourself as chairperson, the vice chairperson, the opposition spokesperson, with support from Bhupinder and Phil, as opposed to them being on the interview panel. So that's, we're just giving you a couple of options. It's fit for the committee to determine.
We have to be mindful that the value of this position is £1,000 a year, and do we really, Phil's on probably £1,000 a minute, so we don't want to spend too much time.
But I think we can be quite clear. We do want them in the room.
Yeah.
And we do want the advice. And what we don't want, obviously, is for us to have a protracted situation. So if it's a question of a recommendation from officers or advice from officers and the final vote being with members, I'm happy about that. And I think Councillor Goldwyn will be as well.
Yeah.
So yes, if I'm
Thank
reading
you.
it correctly, then the proposal in the room is for the membership panel to be, interview panel to be yourself as chairperson, the vice chairperson, and the opposition spokesperson, as I say, with support from the assistant director, legal and governance, and the chief operating officer. I mean, that's everybody.
Everybody happy with it? Can we take that as a recommendation and agree the recommendation is written with the specification around the voting? Sorry.
Yes, so in terms of the recommendations then, so obviously we can take account of Councillor Hackwell's comments in terms of the job description. Obviously, if any other members have comments this evening, obviously please let us know now. So that would cover off recommendation at 1.1. In terms of 1.2, obviously we're asking you to agree the panel be established, but obviously not on the basis as recommended in the report, but rather just the three councillors with support from the officers. So I think that would cover off 1.2, and of course then 1.3 is the recommendation to delegate authority to the chief operating officer in consultation with yourself, chairperson, and the assistant director, just to finalise that job description, taking into account comments from the committee, and then obviously to arrange for that process to be undertaken. So if that is acceptable to the committee, we can run with that.
Thank you, everybody. Yeah. Oh.
So I'll leave that for the committee to agree.
Are we moving?
I move recommendation 1.1, 1.2 and 1.3 at page 31 that the committee the committee would like to amend the job description to state that Medway councillors rather than councillors. 1.2, the committee agree that an interview panel be established for the purpose of shortlisting and interviewing applicants for the role of independent member, and to make a recommendation to the Audit Committee for approval of the proposed candidate as set out in paragraph 5.2 of the report. The interviewing committee will comprise of the chair, vice chair and opposition spokesman with support from officers. 1.3, the committee agreed to delegate authority to the Chief Operating Officer in consultation with the chairperson and assistant director, legal and governance, to finalise the job description, taking into account comments from the committee, and to arrange for the recruitment process to be undertaken as set out in sections 4 and 5 of the report.
Is it actually necessary for the committee to make the final decision, bearing in mind that 3 members of this committee will be on the interview panel, and there's only 5 of us on the committee? If those 3 members have made the decision, there's very little the other 2 can do about it. So I would like to say that we delegate that responsibility to members of the the interview panel.
Is that seconded?
If I could just come in, if we were doing...
Oh, mine's at...
That's all right. Thank you, Councillor Ackwell. We wanted to avoid the need to establish a formal subcommittee, as in a committee would, like the appointments committee. So the idea would be that the interview panel in this occasion would be kind of more informal, with a recommendation back to Audit Committee. I don't think it will kind of lengthen the process too much, but we would have to then establish a formal subcommittee to enable committee members to make that decision outside of this room. Is that okay?
Thank you for your intentions, Councillor Hackwell, and thank you for the explanation, Wayne. I'm content if that's seconded. Does the committee agree? Thank you very much, everybody. We're moving on to item 7, which is the internal update from 1st of December 2023 to January 2024. And I'll ask James Larkin to introduce this report, please. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Chair. The report at Appendix 1 is the third and final update on progress against the 2023-24 internal audit plan ahead of the annual report, and details of the work of the team from 1st of December 2023 to 31st of January 2024. Just briefly, Section 4, starting on page 45 of your pack, shows how our resources have been used over the period, and also details the latest projections on available resources as a consequence of staff sickness and periods of vacancy. Full details of progress against the 2023-24 plan can be found in the tables at Section 5, starting on page 46, and details from reviews that have been finalised since our last report are included. An update against the team's key performance indicators for the reporting period is provided at Section 6 of the report, which starts on page 55. You'll see that planned delivery at the end of the reporting period was 48%, with a further 37% underway. Obviously, the outturns provided are as of the 31st of January. However, as of today, I can tell you that 13A, which relates to the proportion of agreed, I may have the wrong numbers, I apologise. The proportion of agreed assurance assignments delivered is now 70%, and a further 26% is underway. As I'm sure you can appreciate, we are now on the 27th of March, and it's the last working days tomorrow before Easter. As a consequence, we may well get some more over the line tomorrow, but we will not be hitting our planned delivery target of 95% by the 31st of March. However, this should not impact on the annual opinion, as we will have time to complete the remaining work ahead of that requirement. Section 7 of the report on page 56 contains details of a revision to the agreed plan with deferral of the review of the Code of Conduct to 2024-25, as the pressures on HR and organisational change at the moment mean it's impractical to complete the review at this time. Finally, Section 8 of the report provides an update in relation to all management actions, with the second table commencing on page 62, detailing all those outstanding more than 6 months after their agreed implementation date. There is only one, and a response has been provided by the service. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Any members? Councillor Nesterov, thank you.
Thank you, Chairperson. I have a few questions, but I guess not. On page 47, let me just get there, just to make sure I know what I'm talking about. There is a referral about the children interest account. I'm a bit concerned about that, because it shows that significant volume of transaction related to direct council expenditure and large volume approved by officer without delegated authority. Is that closed now? Or
The interest account is in effect a petty cash account. What the review identified was The officers were obviously using that, and it wasn't being approved the expenditure wasn't being approved in line with the requirements set out in the council policies. It has been highlighted to the service. As we've said, as we've reflected, it appears to be that more officers need more training around this. I think some of this is going to be linked to potential turnover in staff, people not necessarily knowing what they should and shouldn't be doing because they may have come from other local authorities where things are a bit different. So the service are working on it to make sure those improvements are in place.
That was actually my second question. What's the cause of this? Is it not enough training, or why was the misuse? But you answered that question. Just my thought. If we have an account, if the council does need an account for small expenditure, maybe we need to name it like that, not to seem like officers are misusing any other accounts.
Yeah, that is the purpose of this account. Effectively, it's for the low-level spend that's kind of urgent requirements for the welfare of children. So obviously, there are some other things that the accounts may be being used for things that aren't quite appropriate, which is obviously what we flagged during the review.
Councillor Hartwell.
James, thank you for your report. Very informative as normal. Just sticking on the imprest account, it seems to me that every time you go and do an audit in a different area of the council, for imprest or credit cards or whatever, the same problems appear, but with different departments. Is there any way that if you find something in children's, you make sure that it's looked at in RCE and all the rest of it? So you do a look across rather than just a silo look, because all this is just a silo view of what's going on in children's. Is there a mechanism that we've got in the council that says, right, we found a problem with imprest reports in children's, does it exist elsewhere and how can we fix it?
Yes, obviously we do try and pass any lessons learned across the whole piece of finance. Any reviews relating to financial matters, the final reports do go to the Section 151 as well. In this instance, I think there are a very limited number of imprest accounts now, because obviously the council are making sure that spend is controlled, so a lot of those have gone. Obviously, with children's, it's a very specific requirement because of the pressures and statutory duties. So, yeah, we can look at other areas. As you know, yes, it is a bit siloed, but we focus our internal audit results on where the risks are. Obviously, the big spend, the overspends, because of the statutory nature, are in children's, hence why we've focused on this. But yeah, obviously, we do any lessons learned, we share that with finance so that their monitoring picks up things as well.
But it doesn't go specifically to the senior management team or it probably does, but I mean, these are the bullet points. We found this in children's. Please go back to your own departments and make sure that you're clean before we come and investigate you.
Yeah, I mean, as I say, the reports are shared with the Section 151. Information does go to the corporate management team as well. And when we say that the spend itself is not appropriate, it's rather in some cases it's maybe not appropriate to use that account for non-urgent spend. So, like I say, we do share the lessons across, and we'll make sure things get in front of the corporate management team as well.
Any other members? Thank you. Sorry, Councillor Nestorov, I missed you there, sorry.
Thank you, sorry. I just want to come back on another question. It's actually a very general question, if I can say so. So on the audit and counter fraud review table, we see a lot of red and amber 57. So just my question is, in general, how can we improve that? Is it because of lack of resourcing, lack of training, lack of people? What is the main reason that we can't improve on this?
Yeah, page 57, these are the actions that have come from, that are being followed up from reviews that have been undertaken at a previous point in time. Yes, there are some red and amber opinions. The reasons behind those opinions and the weaknesses in internal control can vary greatly across the different services. Yes, it's possible that resourcing pressures could be leading to some of these things, but I'd have to look at the individual reviews themselves and refresh my memory, because I see a lot of them, as to exactly what the specific reasons for those weaknesses were. So I don't think there's a blanket piece that you could throw across them all. Yeah, no. If it was a one-size-fits-all, I think things would be a lot easier for us.
Thank you for that answer.
Councillor Dole?
Can I just ask, I thought I'd follow on Councillor Nestor's point, because I think, particularly on financial planning and budget setting, if we have problems there that are not, you know, it looked from this report, which I know is very bland, you know, you've got to get through a lot of stuff, but it does worry me that there are items there which presumably are of great significance to the authority potentially, if they're going right across our financial planning and budget setting regime. Are we happy about that, or is you know, because I mean you're saying here at one point you've got one high and one medium there. Well, they're quite concerning, I would have thought.
Yeah, as I say.
Sorry.
With that, I'd have to go back to the individual report itself, because that particular review is, I think, is from last year off the top of my head, so I don't have any details to hand. Obviously, when we identify weaknesses in control, management agree actions to deal with those weaknesses and put things in place to improve the control environment. We have this follow-up process where we go back to make sure that those actions have been implemented to address the control weaknesses. So obviously that's the reason we present this as part of the reports to the Audit Committee, so that the committee themselves are aware for the scrutiny that they provide over the control environment. So we do keep an eye on it. We are, as part of this year's plan, starting to look at some of our core areas as well. I think control weaknesses in any area of business is something we should be concerned about in terms of, do we need to look at it? Yes, we do, but actions are being taken, and obviously we follow up on those to make sure that they're happening.
I would have thought that you know, on that particular area, perhaps the chairman would like to be assured, I imagine, from you that actually they are getting the right level of attention. Because I don't understand from this list exactly what those concerns are. And I'd hate to think there's something floating in there that could be quite serious. And we're not actually, you know, as an audit committee, we're not applying to it. So could I suggest that the chairman gets a report on that? And obviously, if there's anything you need to bring to us, you will.
I think the issue that we are actually reviewing there on that item is the HRA one, which is the formalised one.
Ah.
We have formalised that.
Through you, Chair, yeah, this isn't actually relating to a review that's been finalised in a reporting period. This is about the follow-up from earlier reviews. I can certainly look into what the progress is with those the actions on that particular review, and pass that note back to the committee as to exactly where these are.
Thank you, Councillor Dole. Just for your assurance to the committee, when there is a concern that the head of internal audit and counter fraud service has about a particular issue, he does actually bring it to my attention, and if it's something that is actually formalising something else, then it just comes to the committee, but otherwise we agree a form of action and his team do follow it up. Thank you. Can I call on the Vice Chair? Thank you.
I move recommendation 1.1 to 1.2 at page 41 that the committee notes the outputs and performance against the internal audit plan for Medway for the period 1st of December 2023 to 31st of January 2024 as detailed at Appendix 1. And the committee approves the revision to the agreed internal audit plan for Quarter 3, Quarter 4, detailed in Section 7 of Appendix 1.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. I now move to the counter fraud update for December 2023 to January 2024, and I'll ask James Starkin to introduce this report too, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yeah, again, the report at Appendix 1 is the third and final update against the plan for 2023-24 ahead of the annual report. And as the Chair has said, this covers the 1st of December to 31st of January. Section 3, commencing on page 68 of your pack, shows how resources have been used over the period, detailing the level of time spent on each of the key areas outlined on the plan. The tables in Section 4, commencing on page 70, provide an overview of the work undertaken in each of those areas on the plan. The tables on page 71 show a summary of results from external investigations and the associated savings, and there is also a brief summary of other counter-fraud activity in the table on page 71, including details of any housing benefit overpayments or excess council tax reduction awards arising as a result of DWP investigations. An update against the team's key performance indicators for this reporting period is provided at Section 5 of the report, which is on page 72. Just in summary, 9 investigations were concluded in the reporting period, which was obviously quite a short one, with associated cashable savings of 3,963. As noted in the covering report, this means there have now been savings of 367,698 for the year to 31st of January 2024, which is in comparison to Medway's share of the counter-fraud costs of the shared service, which are approximately 236,815 for the year. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Members? If I've got no members, I've just got one comment to make, and that is that I'd like to thank the team for their diligence and effort on our behalf, and it does prove that this is a really important part of what they do. I'd just like that noted. Thank you. May I ask the Vice Chair then, please?
I move the recommendation at page 65 that the committee notes the outputs and performance of the counter-fraud team for Medway for the period 1st of December 2023 to 31st of January 2024 as detailed in Appendix 1, and the Chair's thanks to the team would like that noted.
Is that seconded? Seconded. Is agreed? Great, thank you. I now move on to the internal audit plan for Quarter 1, Quarter 2, 24-25, and I'll ask James again to introduce this report, please.
Thank you, Chair. We are required to prepare an audit plan outlining how the internal audit resource will be used. While we have mapped out the entire year for administrative purposes, the plan presented at Appendix 1 only covers the first 6 months of the year and mainly incorporates the reviews that were high scoring in our independent assessment, although we have tried to take into account demands on services to ensure we're not conducting a review at a completely inappropriate time, such as while finance are dealing with final accounts. The risk assessment to inform the plan was completed after consultation with all divisional management teams to gauge the views of managers on what they consider to be the risks to their services in the coming year. And the plan shows links to the corporate risk register to demonstrate that the audit resource is targeted to the highest areas of risk for the authority. We will be reviewing our risk assessment in July to reflect any changes in risk priorities and prepare the plan for the second half of the financial year, which will be presented alongside the first update report in September. I'm now seeking the committee's approval for the proposed plan for Quarter 1, Quarter 2, and I'm happy to take any questions.
Members? Thank you very much, James. May I call on the Vice Chair?
I move the recommendation at page 75 that the committee approves the internal audit plan quarter 1 to quarter 2, 2024 to 25, presented at Appendix 1.
Is that seconded? Thank you. Is it agreed? Thank you very much. I now move to the counter fraud plan for 24-25, and I'll ask James to introduce that.
Thank you, Chair. The counter fraud plan for 2024-25 outlines how we intend to use the resource dedicated to counter fraud over the next 12 months, clearly outlining the work that will be undertaken in the key areas. This does not include resource dedicated to internal grievance and disciplinary investigations that we now handle, as that is a separate area of work. We are currently scoping out plans for proactive work that we aim to complete during the year, although this is not specifically listed due to sensitivity. Essentially, we don't want to tell people we're coming to look for them. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction, so I'm happy to take any questions.
Members, any questions? I've got no questions. Thank you very much, members. Can I take that to the Vice Chair now, please?
I move recommendation 1.1 at page 87 that the committee approves the counter fraud plan 2024 to 25 presented at Appendix 1.
That's seconded. Thank you. Is that agreed? Thank you, members. Agreed. Now move on to the Internal Audit and Quality Assurance and Improvement Programme, and I'll ask James to introduce this report also, please.
Thank you. The public sector internal audit standards require that we develop a quality assurance and improvement programme that enables an evaluation of the internal audit activities' conformance with the standards, whether auditors apply the code of ethics, and also the efficiency and effectiveness of internal audit and whether there are opportunities for improvement. Known as the QAPE for short, this is reviewed annually to ensure it meets the requirements set out in the standards and accurately reflects the work of the service. As with the charter that the committee approved in January, we have only made some minor amendments to ensure the document is accurate, but the release of the new global internal audit standards is going to place new requirements upon us. As such, we'll be reviewing our compliance with these standards between now and 9th of January 2025 when they come into effect, including making any necessary changes to the QAPE. I'm happy to take any questions members may have.
Any questions from members? No questions from members. Thank you very much. Thank you, James. And we move to Vice Chair, please.
I move the recommendation at page 97 that the committee approves the internal audit quality assurance and improvement programme presented at Appendix 1 for use in 2024-25.
That's seconded?
Seconded.
Thank you. Is that agreed? Agreed. Thank you very much, members. And I now move to the Homes England's Compliance Audit Report. This is a technical update from James, and I ask him to move, please.
Thank you, Chair. You'll all be pleased to know this is the last one from me this evening, and it's not even from my service. Homes England conducted a compliance audit to confirm that confirms grant recipients have met the funding conditions and contractual requirements for the rough sleeping accommodation programme. As you'll see, this resulted in a green opinion, although there was one low priority recommendation. This actually related to a clerical error on a return that was required, although it did not result in any material impact. The error itself was corrected as soon as it was identified, and the service also did further checks to ensure there were no other errors or discrepancies, and there were none. They have put in place new processes to ensure that this sort of thing doesn't happen again in the future as well. Part of the requirements is that this report is presented to the committee in order to acknowledge the findings and recommend for it to be entered onto the Homes England IMS system. That's all I was going to say by way of introduction. If there are any member questions, I will do my best, but I've had no involvement in this one.
Imagine if you've got this through, you got through with Homes England, and you've only got that minor thing. I think you've done very well, actually. I think because I know them of old, and they can be quite nasty. So I think that we've done very well. So congratulations.
I'll pass that on to the housing service because it's actually them that were audited. I'm just presenting on their behalf this evening.
Councillor Hackwell,
No,
thank you.
This is not really a question for you, James, but I was surprised to learn that we purchased 6 flats and 2 of them are still not habitable. Can we get an understanding of why it's taken so long to it's nothing that you can answer us, but the report actually says that we built 6 flats a year ago and only 4 are habitable, and we're trying to get another 2 habitable. I would have thought that we could get them habitable a lot quicker than that. So I'd like to know why it's taking so long.
Can we refer that to the correct committee? Committee that... Yeah, because it's not for this committee. Any other questions? Relevant questions? Firstly, I'd like to thank Councillor Doe for his contribution there, to thank the officers that were involved to making sure that they got everything right with that. And the other thing I'd like to add to this is that actually the audit function is very, very useful in driving some improvements, and this is a case in point, the improvements coming from the services. So I'd like to add my thanks to officers for getting that one right as well. May I move to the Vice Chair, please? James, you get to go home.
I move the recommendation at page 107 that the committee acknowledges the findings of the report and recommended that this is entered onto the Homes England IMS system. We'd like to pass our thanks to the officers involved, and any questions will be passed to the relevant committee.
The specific question regarding the housing issue will be passed because it's not proper for this committee. Thank you. Is that seconded?
Seconded.
Is that agreed? Thank you. And this meeting is now closed. Thank you, everybody.